Long ago, there was a world, complete, governed, sacred. Before they renamed our rivers, before they burned our shrines, before they called our gods demons, we had feminine power that needed no permission. We had architecture of the soul. We had science they called madness. We had a relationship with our ancestors that made us unafraid of living. They told you Africa had no God worth knowing. They were wrong. We had gods. Before I tell you about the gods of IGBOLAND, I need to tell you something that will change the way you see everything that comes after it. The Igbo people, one of the largest ethnic groups in all of Africa, built one of the most sophisticated spiritual systems the world has ever produced. Not myths, not superstition, not primitive religion, a complete cosmological architecture with a supreme being at its center that theologians and scholars are still struggling to categorize today. His name is Chukwu, and here is what they never taught you in school. Chukwu was never given a human face. Think about that. Every major religion you've ever studied gave their god a form, a body, a face, a throne you could carve, an image you could paint on a ceiling. The ancient Igbo refused, not because they did not believe in him, but because they understood something so philosophically advanced that Western theology took 2,000 years to arrive at the same conclusion, that the source of all things cannot be contained in a form. His name breaks into two Igbo words, Chi, the divine spark, and Uku, the great, the vast. He is literally the great spirit inside everything. And here is the secret that rewrites African history. Every single human being, according to Igbo cosmology, carries a fragment of Chukwu inside them. They called it your Chi, your personal God, the divine intelligence that chose your destiny before you were born. You are not separate from the divine. You are made of it. Now, when the colonizers arrived in Igbo land in the late 1800s, they found the people who already had monotheism, who already had the concept of a supreme, formless, all-knowing creator, who already had the idea of a divine spark living inside every human being. And they called it primitive. But here is what history recorded and nobody talks about. The oracle of Arochukwu, Ibini Ukpabi, called by the British the Long Juju. This was Chukwu's earthly voice. Located in Arochukwu in present-day Abia State, it operated for centuries as the most powerful judicial, political, and spiritual institution in all of southeastern Nigeria. Communities hundreds of miles away sent tributes. Wars were stopped by its verdicts. Disputes between kingdoms were resolved at its chamber. It had more political authority than any single king or chief in the region. In 1901, the British sent a military expedition specifically to destroy it. They called it the Aro Expedition. 4,000 soldiers against the shrine, because they understood that as long as Chukwu's voice had authority, their authority had limits. So they destroyed it, burned the shrine, dismantled the oracle, told the Igbo people their God was not real. But Chukwu needed no building. He needed no oracle. He never did, because he lives in the chi of every Igbo person who survived what came after. In you, right now, listening to this.
Before the first king built his palace in IGBOLAND, she was already there. Before the first law was written, she was already enforcing it. Before the first child drew breath, she had already decided the terms. Her name is Allah. Allah, also known as Ani, Anna, or Ale, is the paramount goddess in Igbo traditional religion, Ordinary, serving as the deity of the earth, fertility, creativity, and morality. As the wife of the sky god, Amadioha, she's considered the source of life, the judgment of human actions, and the custodian of law and customs, Omenala. She is not just a goddess. An entire moral architecture, an entire understanding of what it means to live on this earth responsibly. Let me tell you what they did not teach you in any school. Allah is the most widely worshipped deity of all Igbo land. She governs from Anambra to Abia, from Enugu to Imo, from Ebonyi to Rivers State. Across every Igbo village, from the smallest hamlet to the greatest kingdom, Allah was there and Allah was Lord. Now here is history they buried. The concept of Nsoala, sacred law, divine taboo, was one of the most sophisticated legal systems ever developed in the African continent. The Igbo did not need colonial courts. They did not need foreign judges. They did not need imported constitutions. They had Allah. Her law, called Alu, governed everything. The killing of a king's man, Alu. The violation of sacred ground, Alu. Certain crimes against women and children, Alu. Destroying the sacred python, her living embodiment anywhere in Igbo land, Alu. These were not suggestions. These were not guidelines. These were cosmic violations that carried consequences the entire community enforced. Because in Igbo cosmology, a crime against Allah was not a crime against the person. It was a crime against the earth itself. To violate Allah was to wound the balance between the living, the ancestors, and the unborn. The Igbo did not separate morality from nature or law from spirituality. Everything was connected. And then the British arrived. They believed power lived in palaces and guns. But in Igbo land, power also lived in the marketplace, in ancestral law, and in women who carried Allah's authority. November 1929, southeastern Nigeria. They were not soldiers. They had no weapons. They had palm fronts and 10,000 of them. The British called it a riot. The Igbo called it what it was, Ogo Umuwine. The women swore. They covered over 6,000 square miles. They shut down colonial courts. They released prisoners. They faced armed soldiers with songs and palm fronts and the ancient right of Igbo women to make war on injustice. 55 of them were unalive, but they did not stop. This was not a riot. This was Allah, moving through the bodies of her daughters, singing, dancing, demanding justice, not as chaos, but as a civilization defending itself. Because Allah was never trapped in a shrine colonizers could burn. She lived in the soil, in the graves of the ancestors, in the moral memory of the people. The colonizers could redraw borders. They could outlaw rituals, but they could not destroy a goddess whose body was the earth itself. She is the earth, and the earth is still here, right beneath your feet, beneath concrete, beneath modern Nigeria. Allah remains, and the earth remembers even when the people forget.
Amadeha, you who see all, know my heart is pure and my hands are clean.
In Igbo land, corrupt politicians did not fear prison. They feared the sky. Let me tell you something about thunder. Every culture on earth that has ever looked up at a storm sky has asked the same question. What is that? Who is doing that and why? The Greeks answered, Zeus. The Romans answered, Jupiter. The Norse answered, Thor. The Yorubas answered Shango, and the Igbo answered Amadioha, his name broken into Igbo roots. Amadi, a title given only to free-born men. Oha, the community, the people, the collective will. Amadioha, the free will of the people. Not merely a god of lightning, but a divine force of justice, a power believed to live within the storm itself. To the ancient Igbo, thunder was never random, lightning was never ordinary, the sky was watching, and morality was woven into the fabric of the universe. That was what made Amadioha terrifying. Now here is the history they buried. His earthly headquarters, the place where Amadioha lives on this earth, is located in Ozuzu Echie local government area, present-day Nigeria, Rivers State. The shrine at Oburama Uku in Ozuzu, one of the oldest continuously active sacred sites in all of southeastern Nigeria. In pre-colonial times, the people of Ozuzu turned Amadioha into something extraordinary. They created the Kamalu Ozuzu, an oracle, a living court of divine justice. Communities traveled hundreds of miles, not to pray, not to make offerings, but to settle disputes. Before the British built their native courts, before they appointed their illegitimate warrant chiefs, the Igbo already had a justice system, and it was incorruptible, because you cannot bribe Amadioha. You cannot pay him off, appoint him, or threaten him. He is the sky, and the sky has always known the truth. Here is the secret that rewrites everything. Amadioha did not just punish with lightning. The ancient Igbo understood that he cast what they called thunderstones down onto Allah, the earth herself. In many traditions, Amadioha was understood as her divine counterpart, the masculine force of the storm meeting the feminine force of the earth, sky and the earth, judgment and morality. Physical objects were found where lightning struck. These thunderstones were collected by the priest of Amadioha, the Umu Amadi, children of Amadioha, a hereditary priestly clan whose authority derived directly from the sky itself. And here is what no textbook records. Amadioha wielded a sacred sword called Manga Kamalu, the sword of Kamalu. This sword was believed to glow red in the presence of people with evil intentions. And when struck on the ground, it caused tremors. The Igbo had a god with a sword that could detect evil by glowing centuries before any technology. And then the colonizers came. They brought their courts, their warrant chiefs, their foreign justice system, and they told the Igbo, your thunder god is a demon. Your oracle is witchcraft. Your priests are criminals. But here is what they could not explain away, even today. In a country where more than 80% of Igbo people are now Christians, when someone is accused of something they did not do, they say,
if I am lying, may Amadioha strike me down.
When someone wrongs another,
may thunder fire you! May Amadioha strike you down!
They renamed him. They outlawed him. They burned his shrines. But they could not stop the people from looking up at the storm sky and knowing somewhere above the clouds, the free will of the people is still listening, still counting, still deciding. Amadioha still lives. Thousands of years before feminism had a name, an Igbo water goddess had already institutionalized women's power into law. There is a river in Anambra State. It has been flowing since before the first Igbo village was built on its banks, since before the first prayer was spoken at its urge. since before the first child was washed in its waters. Its name is Idemili, and the goddess who lives in it, who is it, is the most powerful feminine deity in all of Igbo cosmology. But let me tell you what they never taught you. Her name, broken into Igbo roots, it is a theological statement. Ide, pillar, Mmili, water, Idemmili, the pillar of water. Not the goddess of water, the pillar made of water, the column of sacred water that holds the sky above the earth. In Igbo cosmology, without Idemmili, the sky falls. Think about that. The Igbo did not build their cosmos on a mountain. They did not build it on a rock. They built it on a river, on a woman, on the most fluid, adaptable, unstoppable force in nature. Because water cannot be destroyed. You can dam it, you can redirect it, you can poison it, but water always finds its way. That is Idemmili. That is what she taught the Igbo about feminine power. Now here is the history nobody tells you. Her earthly home, Nnobi, a town in Anambra State, and what the people of Nnobi built around her worship was one of the most extraordinary feminine political systems in the history of African continent. It was called the Equetitle. In most of pre-colonial Africa, and certainly in the version of Africa the colonizers described, power belonged to men. Titles belonged to men. Political authority belonged to men. In Nnobi, under Idemmili's governance, women of achievement could take the Equetitle, not as women's consolation prize, not as a ceremonial honor with no real power. The Equetitle gave women political authority equal to men. The right to take a wife, the right to proceed over community decisions, the right to be addressed with the same honorifics as the highest male title holders. A woman who achieved enough in trade, in farming, in community leadership could become functionally a man of title. The Igbo called her Obinolo, the Obi in the home. Tradition dictates that killing a python is an abomination. Historically, if an Eke is mistakenly killed, the community requires it to be buried with full funeral rites, the same way a prominent traditional chief would be laid to rest. The snakes are historically known to live harmoniously with people according to the local law. When a baby is born, the python visits the home and cuddles with the newborn. It is a sign of a blessing from the goddess. She was not a gentle river goddess. She was a goddess of sovereignty. In Igbo oral tradition, Idemmili challenged Chukwu himself, the supreme being, the creator of all things, the formless, the vast, the unchallenged source of the universe. She challenged him in the contest of beauty and cosmic authority, and the creator himself was impressed by her. And then the colonizers came. They built Catholic churches on the banks of Idemmili's sacred river. They banned the python ceremony. They told the women of Nnobi that their Equetitles were pagan, that their political authority was primitive, that the correct relationship between a woman and the divine was submission, not sovereignty. But here is what they could not take. The Idemmili River, still flowing, still there, still carrying its current, the memory of a goddess who held up the sky. Water always finds its way. She always finds her way. She is still here. Every civilization built gods you went to. The Igbo built a god that came to you, that lived with you, that was accountable to you. His name is Ikenga. And the first thing you need to understand is that his name is not just a name, it's a command. Ike, power, Nga, place. But the deeper meaning is this. Ikenga is not the spirit of potential. He is the spirit of execution. Strength in motion, activated, directed, wielded. He is not a state of being, he is action itself. Now here is what nobody tells you. Ikenga is not simply one force, he is a convergence point. Inside every Ikenga figure, 4 forces meet simultaneously. Your Chi, your personal divine spark, your Ndiche, the power of your ancestors, your Ike, your personal strength, and your Aka Ikenga, your right hand. The right hand, when an Igbo man grips a machete, that gesture is invocation. When he plants a yam, that is prayer. When he signs a covenant, that is worship. The body is the temple. Through the right hand, a man makes his chi visible. Now here is the secret that reshapes how many understand Ikenga. Some oral traditions describe Ikenga as an ancient warrior force tied to cycles of renewal, justice, and transition. The two-faced Ikenga, one face looking towards the old year, one face looking towards the new, became associated in some traditions with transition, threshold, and passage of time. He carries the praise name Ikenga or water, the spirit who opens pathways. Some scholars and cultural interpreters have drawn comparison between his symbolic role and later doorway deities found elsewhere in the ancient world. And still, very few people speak about it. Here is what the elaborate Ikenga figure holds in his hand. In his right hand, a machete. In his left hand, a severed head. The severed head is not decorative. In Igbo tradition, taking a head in a battle proved that a man had acted, had faced death directly, had completed what he started. Ikenga does not reward ambition, he rewards completion. Now, here is a deeper symbol many overlook. On Ikenga's face, Iche scarifications, parallel vertical lines on the forehead and temples. These are not merely aesthetic markings. Among the Iche markings carried associations with status, ritual purifications, and spiritual authority. And the ram horns, many see aggression, but another interpretation survives evil thoughts. 2 open arms turned towards the sky, open, honest, a covenant posture, saying to the universe, witness what I believe. Now here is one of the most powerful truths about Ikenga. Ikenga could be attacked, destroyed. When things fall apart, a man destroys another man's Ikenga. The act is treated not as simple property damage, but as a profound assault on identity, dignity, and spiritual authority. To break a man's Ikenga was to attack his accumulated will, his ancestral legitimacy, his spiritual center in a single act. And at the end of a man's life, his Ikenga was often destroyed. Your strength could not simply be transferred, each generation had to build its own. Colonial forces entered Igbo homes and carried many of these figures away. Today, Ikenga figure sits in museums across Europe and America. London, Paris, Berlin, New York, behind glass, under fluorescent lights, labeled as artifacts. Sacred symbols of personal destiny turned into museum objects. But they could not take what the figure was always pointing towards, your right hand. Still here, still yours, still capable of building, creating, defending, and becoming. The ram does not retreat from resistance. It lowers his head and moves forward. What are you building today? Ikenga still lives in your right hand.
The
There is an Igbo deity standing outside the United Nations building in New York right now. Most Nigerians do not know this. Most Igbo people have never been told. Every morning, without fail, without being asked, without expecting anything in return, the sun rises. The Igbo people of the southeastern Nigeria looked at this act, the most consistent act in the history of the universe, and they said, that is not physics, that is love. And love has a name, Anyam. The name breaks into Igbo words. Anya, eye, Aum, sun, Anyam, the eye of the sun, not the sun itself, the eye. Because the Igbo understood something that no other civilization articulated this precisely. The sun does not just give light, the sun sees. Every morning, Chukwu, the supreme being, opens his eyes over Igbo land, and that eye, that gaze, that divine seeing Ayahu, Chukwu's eye, looking at the world, making sure you are still here, making sure you are still building, making sure the earth is still receiving what it needs. Now here is the history they buried. The center of Anyanwu's worship was Agunkunri in the present-day Anambra State, considered one of the major cultural epicenter of all Igbo civilization. The Inri people were so devoted to Anyanwu that they wore the sun on their faces. The Inchi, scarifications, 16 straight lines, 8 crosses, carved into the forehead and temples, arranged to mirror exactly the rays of the sun at full noon. Not as decoration, as identity. When you saw an Inchi marked face, you were looking at a person who has made a covenant with the sun, who had agreed to carry Anyanwu's light in their body for life. And here is the secret that rewrites African history. The Inri believed that Anyanwu shared the sun with Agbala, the Holy Spirit, the collective consciousness of all sacred beings. The sun was not just a light source, the sun was a dwelling place. Agbala lived there, Anyanwu lived there. The spirits of the most holy human and non-human all gathered in the sun. The Igbo placed heaven inside the sun, thousands of years before any other civilization made that theological move. Now here is the most radical secret of all. Anyanwu has no fixed gender. Some communities of Igbo land know Anyanwu as him. Some know Anyanwu as her. Some understand Anyanwu as both. And some understand Anyanwu as beyond the question entirely. And the Igbo answer to why the most sophisticated theological statement about gender and the divine ever spoken. The sun gives light to the woman in her field, and the man on his road, and the child who has not yet learned anyone's name, equally, without preference, without condition. A force that serves everyone equally cannot belong to one gender. The sun does not choose who to rise for. And then the colonizers came, and they told the Igbo, your sun deity that transcends gender is primitive. But here is what they could not erase. In 1954, a Nigerian artist named Ben Enwanwu created a bronze sculpture. He called it Anyanwu, the Awakening. That sculpture stands today outside the Nigerian National Museum in Lagos. And a version of it stands at the headquarters of the United Nations in New York City since 1966. Anyanwu, the Igbo sun deity they tried to erase, has been standing in front of the United Nations for nearly 60 years. Every morning, the sun rises over New York, over Lagos, over Anambra State, over the Inri home where the Ichimat prince first looked at the sky and said, that is not physics, that is love. And love has never needed anyone's permission to keep rising.
Aguna Abia! My decay!
Every artist, healer, diviner, and seer who was ever called crazy before they were called brilliant, they all had the same patron deity. His name is Ago. And the Igbo have known him for 10,000 years. Before I tell you about Ago, I need to tell you something about the people sitting in your life who have been called too much, too sensitive, too intense, too creative, too different, too difficult. The ones whose gifts look from the outside exactly like their problems. The Igbo had a name for what lives in them. They had a theology for it. They had a deity who claimed them before anyone else understood them. His name is Agunsi. And here is what that name means. Agu, confusion or talent, the same word. In Igbo cosmology, confusion and talent are not opposites. They are the same force moving through a person who has not yet learned how to direct it. Nsi, medicine, or poison, again, the same word. Because medicine and poison are the same substance in different doses. Agunsi, confusion or talent, medicine or poison, sacred madness or divine genius. The deity whose entire name is built on the truth that the line between breakdown and breakthrough is not a wall, it's a threshold. Now, here is the history nobody tells you. In Igbo cosmology, Agu holds a position second to only Allah herself. More powerful than Amadioha, more feared than Ikenga, second only to Earth Mother. And here is the bad story that the colonizers tried the hardest to suppress, because it is the most radical story in all of ordinary. Agu was born resembling a human, but he was marked by deformities. He appeared monstrous. His abnormal hands and feet were restrained. He was declared an abomination, and he was carried into the Igbo forest, the place where the Igbo put things they could not understand and did not want to keep. But Agu returned to the house before those who had taken him away had even come back home. He was in the house when they walked through the door. The thing they had tried to throw away was already home, waiting, looking at them. That is not mythology. That is the experience of every gifted person who was ever called crazy and came back home anyway. Agu has no fixed gender. The trickster is considered capable of being either gender at any time, even both at once, or neither at all, because the force that breaks you to open to make you brilliant does not check your gender before it chooses you. Agu chooses based on capacity. The capacity to hold more than ordinary humans hold, the capacity to see what others cannot see, the capacity to survive being broken open and build something from the pieces. Here is how the calling announces itself. Mental fog that will not lift, sickness that has no medical explanation, prophetic dreams, a sudden understanding of herbs, the urge to visit sacred places without knowing why, creativity arriving uninvited, visions of water beings and marked spirits. The Igbo called this the Agu affliction, and they knew immediately what it meant, not illness, selection, and the response was not medication, not putting them in an institution, not telling the person to calm down. The response was Irago, the initiation ceremony. The community gathering around the chosen one and saying, "We see what is happening to you. We know what it means. We will walk with you through the threshold." And on the other side, you will be a giver, a healer, a diviner, a person who can go anywhere others cannot, and come back with what the community needs. And then the colonizers came, and they looked at the Agu affliction, the sign of someone being prepared for the most important role in Igbo society, and they called it mental illness. They medicated the dibia. They institutionalized the seers. They told the healers what was happening to them was a malfunction, not a calling. But here is what they could not take. Agu does not demand permission. He does not respect colonial borders. Agu does not care what century it is. He is still choosing people right now in Lagos, in London, in New York, in every city where an Igbo child is being told that their intensity is a problem when it's actually a calling. Agu found them. He has always found them. And when they finally stop fighting what they are, when they face Agu instead of running from him, what comes out of the other side is the most extraordinary thing any community has ever produced. A person who can heal what medicine cannot touch. A person who can see what science cannot measure. Agu was there first. He will be there last. He's already in your house, waiting, looking at you.
Great Mother, I beg you, change my destiny. Unteach its waters. You have answered.
You have heard of Mami Water. You have seen the paintings. You have heard the stories. What nobody told you is that her original home is IGBOLAND. There is an Igbo water goddess who has the power to change your destiny before you were born. She meets every soul at the river crossing between the spirit world and this one. And she has been doing this since before history was written, before you took your first breath, before you crossed that river. Every soul, according to Igbo cosmology, crosses the river between the spirit world and this one. And at that crossing, standing in the water, is a goddess. She does not let you pass without stopping. She challenges the path of destiny that your body and your soul made before Chukwu sent you here. She looks at what you were given. She looks at what you are going to do with it. And if she chooses, she can change it. Her name is Ajumiri. Let me tell you what you were never taught. Ajumiri is the sea goddess of Nkwere, a town in present-day Imo State, southeastern Nigeria. She is the RC of prosperity, fertility, and what the Igbo call general well-being, which is not a small thing. General well-being in Igbo cosmology means everything. Your health, your children, your trade, your harvest, your relationships, your standing in the community, the quality of life you are living, all of it under her governance. But here is a name that rewrites everything. The generic Igbo term for supreme water goddess is Nnemiri, the mother of the water. And in Igbo cosmology, all water bodies are linked. Every river, every lake, every stream, the Niger, the Imo River, the Idemmili, the Atlantic Ocean itself, they are all connected. They are all her. Different names, different communities, different shrines, one mother. And here is a secret that rewrites African history. You have heard of Mami Water, the water spirit, the beautiful woman, the mermaid figure that appears across West Africa, Central Africa, the Caribbean, Brazil, Haiti. Wherever the African diaspora went, she went with them. Her origin traced directly back to IGBOLAND. When the slave ships came, they took millions of Igbo people across the Atlantic. The people who carried her with them in their memory, in their prayers, in their understanding of what water means. Igbo people looked at the ocean that has swallowed their world and said, she is there, she crossed with us, she is still here. This is the theology nobody teaches you. Ajumiri does not just give wealth, she governs the crossroads between worlds. Before birth, she meets you at the river. She is the goddess of the crossroads where your destiny was set. And she is the only being in all of Igbo cosmology who can renegotiate it. If she chooses to help a person change their destiny to become wealthy, successful, powerful beyond what was originally written, there is a price. Not money, not sacrifice. The price is her. The person belongs to her. They must abstain from certain things. They must maintain the covenant. They must return to the water. They must remember where their extraordinary fortune came from. And the ones who forget, who take the prosperity and ignore the covenant, the water reclaims what it gave. That is not a curse. That is a contract. The most honest contract any deity in Igbo land offers. And then the colonizers came. They looked at the water shrines of Ajumiri, at the female priestesses who served her, the Ezewine women of enormous spiritual authority. They looked at the water herbalist, Dibia Miri, who knew the medicinal secrets of every water plant. They looked at the community who swore by her name to prove their innocence because they believed that wherever her shrine stands, the place and its people must be pure, and they called it idol worship. They told the people that the water had no mother, that the goddess at the crossing was a demon, that the contract she offered was a sin, but they could not drain the rivers, they could not empty the sea, they could not take the water out of the world and pretend it had no meaning. Ajumi is still in the water. Every river in IGBOLAND, every ocean that holds the memory of everyone who crossed it. Water remembers everyone. It always has. It always will.